with the lecture on financial statements of a company as per Schedule 3 of Companies Act 2013. In past two lectures, we have discussed some of the aspects that included what financial statements are, what is included in the financial statements, then what is the main theme on the basis of which financial statements are presented, which basically is distinction between current and non-current items, both on the liability side as well as on the asset side. Then we broadly reviewed the vertical format of balance sheet, which is provided by Schedule 3. And after that, we have discussed various items along with the disclosure requirements connected with those items with reference to the equity and liabilities. I believe we have completed liability side yesterday. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes. And then we started off with some details on the asset side also. And I think we have completed fixed assets also. Please mute yourself. Who is this Lata Mangeshkar singing in the lecture? I will have to think.
सर आप उसका माइक म्यूट कर दो।
मैंने कर दिया, म्यूट ऑन कर दिया। किसका था?
अरविंद कोई तो। Arvind.
So, Arvind. So we started with non-current assets, and I think we have discussed about fixed assets, right? And after discussing fixed assets, including the presentation part of fixed assets, we were discussing about non-current investments. And we discussed some of these items, like what is the classification, what are the disclosure requirements, and those kind of things. I think this part was completed yesterday.
Yes.
Okay, fine. So then we go to the next aspect, which is again a non-current asset, and this is long-term loans and advances. As you can see the balance sheet, if you recall what we saw yesterday, the asset side presentation, it is basically distinction between non-current and current assets. Within non-current assets, you have fixed assets, you have investments, and then you also have long-term loans and advances. So what items are usually covered under long-term loans and advances? One among them is capital advances. If you are given any advance for capital expenditure, then that will be covered under this particular category. Say for example, you want to buy a machinery and you are given some advance to the concerned supplier. So in that case, that becomes a capital advance or advance towards capital expenditure, and that will be reflected under this head. The next one is security deposits. Sometimes you keep the security deposit for leased premises. You take the premises on the rental basis, and landlord will ask you to keep some deposit with him as a security deposit. Most of the times, these lease arrangements are for a longer period, more than a year, and therefore it will be then considered as long-term loans and advance. So security deposits of this kind for premises, etc., which you are taken on lease, will come under this category. At times, you also give some other type of security deposits, and if it is for a longer period, then that will also be covered here. For example, sometimes when you take data connections or when you take billing connections for mobiles or internet, etc., you may have to keep some deposit with the service provider. That is again for a long term. As long as you are using the connection, you will have to keep that deposit. So that will also come under same head. Any long-term advances or loans to related parties. So if there are any long-term loans or advances given to, say, directors or their relatives or entities in which directors are interested or shareholders are interested or their relatives are interested, then such advances will be shown separately under this particular head. Then any other advances other than this, if you have any other long-term advances other than these categories, that could be considered here. Then what is the additional information required? You have to classify the advances as secured and unsecured. So if the advances are secured, you will classify them accordingly. If these are unsecured, you will have to provide the specific information. If they are secured, then you will have to also clarify what is the nature of security which is provided to you. So that information is required in the balance sheet. You will also have to state whether loans and advances are considered as good for recovery or whether these are doubtful for recovery. Good for recovery in the sense you can recover the money in normal course of business. There is nothing wrong with the person to whom the loan or advance has been given, and you can recover that money in normal course of business. Then it becomes a normal good loan and not in the nature of a doubtful kind of a loan. But if it is doubtful for recovery, then you will have to specify that fact. Similarly, if you have made any provision, just like you make a provision for doubtful debtors, similarly here also, if you have made any provision for doubtful loans and advances, you will have to reduce it from the appropriate balance of long-term loans or advances. Then loans and advances to directors or other officers or related parties. A specific disclosure requirement whenever the loans are advanced to directors or other officers of the company or related parties. We already referred to what is meant by related parties. So if any advances are given to such related parties, that will warrant a separate disclosure in Schedule 3. Are you clear about what we discussed so far about long-term loans and advances? Yes? Can we go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So basically, long-term loans and advances is the third item in your non-current category. Then any other non-current asset. We have seen three types of non-current assets so far. One is fixed assets, second one is investments, and now then we just discussed the long-term loans and advances, and now we have a category of other non-current assets. Now, what are the details to be shown here? One of the example could be long-term trade receivables, including deferred payment receivables. Sometimes when you sell the goods or when you provide the services, your trade receivables or debtors may have a longer period of recovery depending on terms and conditions of your contract with such customer. And if it is a long-term trade receivable, then that will be treated as a non-current asset under this category. If at all you have given him a deferred payment option, deferred payment in the sense he will pay, your customer will pay in installments. Ordinarily, your customer will pay in one single payment, but many a times it is possible that you allow him to pay, make a deferred payment over a period of time. So if at all you are providing deferred payment facility, then such customers' balances or trade receivables will be treated as other non-current assets. Apart from that, in case you have any other such balances, those can also be considered here as other non-current assets which are not previously covered under respective heads of items. Here also some disclosure is required. For example, whether these are secured or unsecured. This is similar to earlier one. Whether these are considered as good for recovery, or do you have any possibilities that it may become a bad debt, or you have doubts about recovery. So that fact will have to be specified. And in case you have made a provision for doubtful portion of such loan or advance, that will have to be shown as a reduction from such balance. So these are the requirements for non-current assets. Similar requirement like long-term loans and advances, if you have any dues from directors or other officers of the company or related parties also, then those other non-current assets or any other items which are covered under this particular category will have to be disclosed separately. So most of the disclosure requirements are similar to what we saw under long-term loans and advances. Now we are moving to the current assets. Till now, our discussion was focused on non-current assets. Now we are moving to the current assets. And the first item in current assets is current investments. Under current investments, if you see the classification is same as what we saw in long-term investment. So you have to classify the items as equity, preference shares, investment in government or trust securities, units, debentures, bonds, mutual funds, investment in partnership funds, or any other category of current investments. Whenever you have investment in companies and partnership firms, you have to provide additional detail of investment. For example, if you have invested in a company, then you will have to provide what is the number of shares which you have acquired, what is the cost of acquisition, and what is the market value if these are quoted investments. And if these are non-quoted investments, you can probably give the book value of these investments in the books of the concerned company. So these are the details required for investment in companies. In case of partnership firm, you will have to also provide the details of capital account as to what was the opening balance, if there was any further addition made in the current year as investment, whether there were any withdrawals, what was the profit allocation, what is the percentage of profit which you get. So all these things with reference to investment in partnership firms will have to be provided for. Whenever such investments are subject to some reduction in value because of market value fluctuations, you may make a provision for reduction in value. And if you make a provision for such reduction in value, that also will be disclosed in the separately in the balance sheet. Then details of partly paid investments. This item was there in long-term investment also, and I think we did not discuss this item in detail. So let me touch upon that particular issue now. Now, what are these partly paid investments? Partly paid investments in the sense, say for example, equity shares or preference shares. Your face value of the share is 10, but the company has asked you to pay only 6 rupees per share. Sometime in future, you will pay that remaining amount of 4 rupees per share. So this is a partly paid investment, and you will have a commitment or a contingent liability to pay that 4 rupees as and when the company calls that amount in respect of shares held or purchased by you. So this kind of information will be mainly in respect of equity and preference shares, which could be partly paid up or fully paid up. If these are partly paid up, then this additional information should be provided. If these are fully paid up, then this will not apply. But if it is partly paid up, then yes, you have to provide that additional information in respect of both long-term investments in that head and current investments over here. Is it clear to everyone what we discussed about current investments?
So can you please again
Yes, sir.
repeat?
Which part? Somebody has doubt. Which part we should discuss again?
So the
Sir.
current investment part.
Current investment. See, what is a current investment? Basically, any current asset for that matter is the one which you are going to realize in your operating cycle, or which will be realized in a period which is less than 12 months, right? So those 2-3 criteria have been given with respect to current assets. So if you fulfill that criteria for investment also, then that investment will be treated as a part of your current investment. For example, equity shares. Suppose you buy and sell on a regular basis, okay? Then it will be a current investment because you are not holding it for a longer period of time. If you recall our investment accounting, okay, we used to have a case of investment in shares, investment in debentures, okay? So there were frequent purchases and sales, correct? Those kind of activities will make that investment as a current investment. And in current investment, what is the classification you have to provide? You have to group together equity shares, then preference shares, government trust securities, that will be a separate sub-item, units, debentures, bonds, these are basically fixed income bearing securities, mutual funds, that will have to be disclosed separately. Investment in partnership firms will be a separate head, and apart from this, you have any other investment that will also come here if it is a current investment. Then if you have investment in company, then you will have to provide the details of number of shares and cost of these shares and related information. If the investment is in partnership firm, you have to specify the extract of capital account, including what was the profit transferred to your capital account during the year, what is your percentage of share in profit, and those kind of things. So that is a disclosure for partnership firm. Whenever you have quoted investments, quoted in the sense which are listed in securities market. Okay, so whenever the quoted investments are listed in security market, you can find out the market value of these investments at the end of the year, and you have to provide information about market value of investment for each of these investments which are listed in securities market. Suppose you have unquoted investments. Unquoted investments in the sense investment in a private limited company or similar type of unquoted investments for which market quotation is not available. These are not freely tradable, so market quotation is not available. So in case of unquoted investments, you may have to provide the details, and especially if these are in the nature of equity, preference shares, or maybe in the nature of mutual fund units which are not listed, etc., you will have to provide the book value of these investments. So that is a requirement in case of non-quoted or unquoted investments. Suppose there is a loss because the market value of the investment has gone down as compared to the book value. Then you may have to provide for that loss, and that provision for loss should be reflected in the same head. Just like you provide for doubtful debtors and you show it as a reduction from sundry debtors in the balance sheet, here also any loss on account of current investment, that loss should be reduced from the balance of current investment in the balance sheet. And the last disclosure is details of partly paid investments. Say for example, you have invested in equity shares of a company. The face value is 10 rupees per share, but company has asked you to pay only 8 rupees per share so far. So sometime in future, the company will have a right to ask you to pay balance 2 rupees per share. So that investment is partly paid investment, and you have a commitment or obligation or contingent liability to pay that 2 rupees per share as and when the company asks you to make that payment. So information of such partly paid investment has to be provided in the balance sheet. Is the conceptual framework clear now for current investments? Yes? Those who had doubts, can we move on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then inventories or stock in trade. Okay. Now inventories will have to be again classified under specific heads. Which are the specific heads? One is raw material. Second one is work in progress. Third one is finished goods. Then you will have stock in trade. Stock in trade basically will be slightly different from finished goods in a sense that finished goods are usually manufactured by you, whereas stock in trade is what you buy and sell. It's a traded stock, stock of traded items. So that is stock in trade. Stores and spares. In case you have a machinery manufacturing setup, you may have some consumable stores and spares in your custody to maintain your normal repairs and maintenance cycle. So such stores and spares which are lying with you will also be part of inventories. Loose tools are again classified as inventories and not as part of fixed assets. These are sundry tools which are used by you mainly in maintenance work, etc. They will not have a very long life as such, and therefore these loose tools are classified under the same head as inventories. Any other type of stock, if you have apart from this any other type of stock, that will be specified here. Then the requirement of disclosure is about basis of valuation. All of you are aware of provisions of Accounting Standard 2, which deals with valuation of inventories. So Accounting Standard 2 provides you overall guidelines to be followed when you value the inventory, and also the prescribed requirements for disclosure related to the basis of valuation. So such information about the basis of valuation has to be provided in your financial statements. Can you recall which method is recommended or accepted under AS2 valuation method? Which are the methods which are acceptable under AS2? Can someone recall? Yes. Which are the methods of stock valuation for that matter? At least that part can you recall?
Weighted average cost.
Weighted average is one, yes.
FIFO and weighted average method.
Weighted average, and which is the other one you said?
FIFO method.
FIFO. Correct. FIFO.
LIFO also.
Yes. These are different methods. You have FIFO, LIFO, simple average, weighted average, standard cost-based valuation. Then there is a global methodology of valuation where you take the selling price and you remove the gross profit margin, and then you arrive at the cost of these items. These are various methods of stock valuation. Generally speaking, out of these methods, two are recommended by AS2. One is FIFO and the second one is weighted average cost method. So whatever method you are following, it should be consistently followed, and that information as regards to basis of valuation has to be provided. Sometimes you may have some goods in transit. That information has to be provided in the balance sheet separately. For example, your supplier has already dispatched the goods, but on 31st March, when you close the account, you are yet to receive the delivery of goods. These might be in transit or with the transporter en route to your office, godown or manufacturing facility. So at that point in time, the goods are in transit. So whenever the goods are in transit, but you have the ownership, the supplier has already transferred the ownership of these goods to you, then you will consider them as part of your stock in trade. And that information of goods in transit should be provided separately. Are you clear about the requirements of inventories? Yes, can we go to the next item?
Yes, sir.
Then trade receivables. Trade receivables are basically sundry debtors. This is the receivable arising from your normal operating activity. So if you are in manufacturing and then sale of goods, then your normal customer balances will come under this particular head. If you are in service industry, then whatever dues are there from your customers on account of service rendered, that will fall as within the purview of what we call it as trade receivables. Now under trade receivables, you have to make certain disclosures. What are the normal disclosure requirements? Firstly, you have to classify whether the debtors are due for period exceeding 6 months or not. If it is for a period exceeding 6 months from the due date, then that will have to be specified separately. And if it is other than that, not more than 6 months, that balance will have to be shown separately. So within debtors, you have to make a two-way classification, those which are outstanding for a period exceeding 6 months and other balances of sundry debtors. You will have to also provide information whether the debtors are secured or unsecured. Most of the times debtors are unsecured, but still, in case you have any secured debtors for whatever reason, that information has to be provided in the balance sheet. Another important aspect is whether these are considered good for recovery or doubtful debts. That means your debtors will be further classified as to those which can be recovered in normal course of business, which are not in the nature of doubtful debts, and the other category where the debtors are in the nature of doubtful debts. So those will have to be separately disclosed. Whenever there is a debtor which is doubtful of recovery, you may have to make some provision for such loss. And if you have made a provision for such doubtful receivables, that provision will be reduced from the balance of sundry debtors or trade receivables in the balance sheet. And here also, you have to provide information about dues from related parties. Related parties will again include directors, shareholders, their relatives, the entities in which directors and shareholders are interested as owners, etc. All those entities are considered as related parties. And then dues from such parties need to be disclosed separately in your financial statements. Is the concept of debtors related provision clear to everyone? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Then we go to the next heading, that is cash and cash equivalent. Basically, these are cash and bank balances, but now the title is slightly different, cash and cash equivalents. So what are the things we need to discuss? One, or disclose rather. One is balance with the banks. If you have bank accounts, then what is the closing balance properly reconciled at the end of the year? Those balances will be reflected under this head. Whether you have any checks or drafts in hand, that will require a separate disclosure. These are the checks received by you from your customers, etc. These are yet to be deposited. On 31st March, these are still in your hands. You could not deposit them. So that will be disclosed separately. Cash in hand. If you have any cash in hand as of 31st March, end of the year, that will be specified separately. Any other cash equivalent means which can be immediately converted into cash. Okay. So if you have any other investment which can be readily converted into cash, it may be treated as cash equivalent. At a short notice, it can be liquidated, and that will come here. Now here, the disclosure requirement says that any bank balances earmarked for a purpose. Suppose whatever balance is there in your bank account, some portion of that balance is kept for a specified purpose, reserved for a specified purpose, then that information should be given in the balance sheet. Then bank balances held as a security. Sometimes the banker uses his lien on some portion of the balance in your account. So that may be used as a security for variety of purposes. For example, you are given the bank guarantees. You are taking the bank guarantee. So bank may demand some fixed deposit from you, which is actually a liquid asset, which is a short-term cash equivalent. But then it will be a bank balance which is earmarked for a particular security, which is reserved for a particular security, that is issue of bank guarantee. So that will have to be specified. Then repatriation restrictions, if any. Sometimes you have banks in some foreign countries outside India, and due to certain economic issues faced in that country or some other reasons, you may not have permission to repatriate or receive that money from that account to your Indian account. There is some restriction. For example, some of the African countries which are in economic crisis, or some of the Middle East countries which are in some military crisis or militancy related crisis, terrorism related crisis, they may put these kind of repatriation restrictions. And in that case, your money is held up in bank account over there, but you cannot transfer that money to India because of these repatriation restrictions. So if any of your bank balances are subject to such repatriation restrictions, then you will have to provide that information under this particular head, because we will be showing those bank balances here, but along with this disclosure, it will have to be specified in the heading. Then bank deposits for exceeding 6 months period. See, normally bank deposits are considered as liquid assets because at short notice you can go to the bank and liquidate that money. So it is actually a cash equivalent which can be easily converted into cash at a very short notice. But sometimes you have bank deposit which is for a period more than 6 months. Then that has to be only disclosed separately, though it is cash and cash equivalent, though it will come under same head. Specific disclosure of a period in this case will be required. So these are the requirements for cash and cash equivalents. Is that clear to everyone? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Any queries so far? Debtors, cash balance equivalents?
No, sir.
Okay. So let's move on. Short-term loans and advances. Sometimes in the business, you may give short-term loans and advances which are adjusted or liquidated within a short span of time. For example, you give a loan to employee and you will recover that money within a period of 6 months or 8 months from his salary in periodical recoveries. So these are the short-term loans and advances. You may give some advances to the supplier before he supplies you the goods, and say within a month when he supplies the goods, it will be adjusted against his amount payable to him. So like that, you may have some short-term loans and advances. These are shown under this particular head. Now, whenever you show the short-term loans and advances, the disclosure requirements and details required to be shown are almost similar like your long-term advances. In fact, for most of the items, whether it is trade receivables, whether it is loans and advances, either short-term or long-term, disclosure requirements are almost similar. For example, given to related parties. If you have given the short-term loans and advances to directors, shareholders, their relatives, entities in which they are interested, then all those are related parties, and then that will have to be shown separately over here. Then given to others. If you have given to outside parties like suppliers or employees, that will come in others. Whether these are secured or unsecured. So again, similar disclosure. If these are secured, specify that. If these are not secured, please specify that over here. Whether these are good for recovery or doubtful. Again, whether these will be recovered in normal course of business, we can call them as good for recovery, or whether there is any doubt about their recovery. If these are doubtful of any payment being received from such person, that will have to be disclosed separately. And if you have any provision made for such doubtful loans and advances, such provision against doubtful loans and advances should be deducted from such balances. So that information about doubtful loans and advances and reduction on that account will also be shown under the same head over here. Apart from that, if you have any other short-term, any other current asset, that will be also shown over here. In case you may have any other current assets which are not fitting into any of the earlier subgroups or whatever, then that can be considered here. Okay. So with this, I think we are more or less through with the asset side of the balance sheet. Any difficulty about the asset side of the balance sheet so far?
No, sir.
Okay. Now we go to one more important disclosure in the financial statements of the company, and that is about contingencies and commitments. See, when you read the financial statements, what you see is a number, financial numbers associated with the transactions executed by the company in the given period, and end of the given period, whatever is the income, whatever is the expenditure, whatever is the profit loss, and what is the position of assets, liabilities, or state of affairs, that is shown on the face of balance sheet. But there may be few transactions which will have some repercussions in next few months or in future, and those are as of now not shown in the balance sheet for certain reasons, because these are transactions which cannot be recorded in the balance sheet. But as a reader, you must know what kind of impact these transactions will have on the balance sheet of a company. And therefore, some of these transactions are disclosed as contingencies and commitments. Now, what is a contingency and what is a commitment? Contingency is a liability that may or may not arise in future. And whether it will arise or not will be dictated by future course of events. You are not sure as of now whether this will happen or not, whether this liability will be there on your head or not, whether it will crystallize or not. It will depend on the future course of events. So only after a few months, when the future course of events takes shape, you will realize whether it has crystallized as actual liability or a loss, or whether it has not crystallized. And apart from that, you may have some commitments. You have engaged, you have entered into some transactions, and those transactions are coming up with commitments. But those commitments are not to be fulfilled immediately now. Those will be fulfilled in some short period of time or in future. So such commitments will have to be disclosed. So what are the examples of contingencies and commitment? One is a contingent liability. Contingent liability is something which may or may not arise in future, and it will be decided on the course of events. So that is known as a contingent liability. As of now, the liability is not crystallized, but it may crystallize in future depending on future course of events. For example, a customer is fighting for some compensation against you. some supplies made by you, customer says these are defective and therefore he wants a compensation. Now he is fighting a legal case. So whether he will win or you will win will depend on the future course of events. So as of now, that is a contingent liability. As of you are not sure whether those claims will actually arise or not. And therefore you don't provide for such claims, right? So that is treated as a contingent liability and therefore it will be disclosed separately. Claims against company not acknowledged as debts. Many a times some parties, including some government agencies like tax authorities, raise certain claims against the company. For example, income tax authorities, they complete your assessment and raise a huge claim for payment of taxes. Indirect taxes, GST, customs, they also at times raise such claims against you, and you are contesting these claims at different levels in different forums, either legal or otherwise. So as of now, you are not acknowledging them as a liability. You are not acknowledging them as a debt or a liability. So these claims which you do not accept as of now, which you are challenging in the court of law or at appropriate level or appropriate forum, those will have to be disclosed separately. Then guarantees. Many a times in your business, you are expected to give guarantees to your customers for certain performances. These could be performance-based guarantees or otherwise. For example, you supply a machinery, there may be some guarantee given to the party that till such time this will work properly or whatever is your commercial commitment. So those are the guarantees. And in some cases, you have to give bank guarantee also to other parties. Some of the government contracts and all that, where you are involved, you may have to provide guarantees to such parties. So these guarantees, if at all you fail to perform, the guarantee will be encashed by the party. Suppose you have given a bank guarantee to a government company where you have made some supplies, etc. And suppose that supply is defective, the government company can encash that bank guarantee. Okay. So then the bank will pay the money to the company and they will recover it from the concerned party, that is you. So in this case, these guarantees are like contingent liabilities. Whether the guarantee will be encashed, you do not know as of now. Whether the claim will arise in this, you do not know as of now. It will be decided by future course of events. And therefore, it will be separately disclosed in the balance sheet. And any other contingencies. Apart from this, if you have any other contingent liability, that will also be shown here. Then commitments. Commitments, as I told you, are the future commitments related to the transactions executed or undertaken by you. One example is estimated contracts to be executed on capital account. For example, you are given a contract for construction of your factory building, which is contract value is say 5 crores. You have engaged a construction company to do this work on your account. Now, as of now, at the end of the year, the work is partly done. Only to the extent of 50 lakhs the work is done, and you may have paid some 30-40 lakhs to the company in settlement of their claim as of now, keeping some amount to be paid afterwards. But what is the estimated contract? The estimated value of contract yet to be executed is nearly 4.5 lakhs. Now, if you look at the balance sheet, nowhere you will write that you have given an order for construction of a factory building where the contract value is 5 lakhs, 5 crores, and as of now you have paid only 30-40 lakhs and the work completed so far is worth 50 lakhs. There is no provision in the balance sheet to disclose this information, but you still have a commitment to pay that 4.5 lakhs as the building work, 4.5 crores as the building work progresses. So based on your contract with that particular construction company, as the building work progresses, you will go on paying them on periodical basis. So that's your future commitment. So this is known as estimated contracts to be executed on capital account, that is a capital expenditure, which will have to be disclosed in the balance sheet. Uncalled liability for partly paid up shares. If you recall our discussion on short-term and long-term investments, in that I have told you, if you have any partly paid up shares, partly paid up investments, those will have to be disclosed separately. And that uncalled liability, whatever is there, will be reflected as part of your commitments, because you have to pay that in future. You are a shareholder of that company. Face value is 10 rupees. As of now, the company has called only 8 rupees per share, and balance 2 rupees will be called up in future at any time. So whenever the company calls that amount in future, you have to pay that amount because the share is partly paid up. So this uncalled liability for partly paid up share is your commitment. That will have to be disclosed over here. Then any other commitment, apart from this, if you have any other commitment, that will also be disclosed over here. Then the next disclosure here is proposed dividend. If the dividend is proposed by the board of directors, earlier there was a provision to include that in financial statements as proposed dividend, which was approved by the directors, proposed by the directors, and which was subject to shareholders' approval in AGM. But as of now, as the provisions of Companies Act stand, you don't have to make a provision for this proposed dividend. It will be disclosed by way of a note in your financial statements under contingencies and commitments. So if the company has declared the dividend, which is to be approved by the shareholders in their general meeting, that information will come under this particular head. Unutilized proceeds of issue of shares. When you issue the shares, you have to specify the purpose for which these shares are issued and how that amount received will be utilized by the company. You may utilize it for your expansion plan, for acquisition of machinery, for expansion of your factory building, and whatever purpose. So till such time these are not used, it becomes unutilized proceeds of issue of shares. You have come up with a public issue to set up a new factory in some area, and you receive the money from shareholders. The money is still lying with you, but the work of that factory is yet to start. The construction is partly going on, but full work is not done. So that means you have not been able to use this entire money as of now for that particular project. So it is lying with you. So unutilized proceeds of issue of shares of this kind will be shown separately by way of a disclosure in the balance sheet. Is that clear? Contingencies and commitments. Yes, any queries, any doubts on this slide? Contingencies, commitments.
Sir.
No, sir.
Can we go ahead? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Fine. So with this, we are almost through with the balance sheet. What we'll do is today we will discuss briefly what is the structure of profit and loss account, and then we will end today's session. And next lecture we will discuss in detail, just like in balance sheet what we discussed, we will discuss each and every item of profit and loss account. Okay. So I will share with you now the P&L account. Okay. The other day I didn't show you P&L account, right? I showed you only balance sheet. So let's have a look at profit and loss account. Is the P&L account screen visible?
No,
No,
sir.
sir.
No, sir.
Okay. I think now it will be visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
So
sir.
again, this format I have taken from guidance note issued by ICAI, which is a publication of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. This is a form of preparation of statement of profit and loss account as per Companies Act. As you can see, firstly, it is a vertical format. Horizontal P&L account is not allowed. There is nothing like trading account, manufacturing account, P&L account, then appropriation. It's just one single profit and loss account. You have to provide name of the company, period for which you are preparing P&L account, rupees, whether you are giving actual rupees or in thousands or in lakhs, and then two columns, current year's data and previous year's data. Just like in the balance sheet also, here you are giving the amounts for the current year and comparative numbers for the previous year. The first heading in P&L account is revenue from operations. So whatever is your revenue from operations, your main activities will be shown here. We will see what details are required separately, but for the time being, this is just a reference. And then any other income, apart from your major operating income, if you have any other income like interest, rent, dividends, something else, that will be your other income. Then total revenue. Then expenses, you have to classify under specified heads. What are the specified heads? Cost of material consumed, purchase of stock in trade, changes in the inventories of finished goods. So this is slightly different than your normal presentation of balance sheet. Work in progress and stock in trade. So wherever there are changes in finished goods, inventories, work in progress, stock in trade, those will have to be shown here. Employee benefit expenses. Whatever expenditure you have incurred for providing extending benefits to the employees, that will be here. Then depreciation and amortization expenses, and then other expenses. So for each of these items, starting from revenue till other expenses, a separate note will be available. And in that separate note, you will provide the relevant details, because when you say employee benefit expenses, it will not be just one item over there. There will be several items of expenses. So we have to find out which items of expenses are compatible over there and include them in the note. Similarly, other expenses, which expenses will go there, that we'll have to identify, prepare a note of that and append it to the profit and loss account. Total amount will come here and note reference will be reflected in the specific column. So other expenses. Then profit before exceptional and extraordinary items. So you are expected to show separately what is known as exceptional items and extraordinary items. We will discuss, as we discuss P&L account in detail, what do you mean by exceptional items and what do you mean by extraordinary items. So you have to find out the profit after exceptional items and profit after extraordinary items, and that will be your profit before tax. Then from profit before tax, you have to provide tax for current period, that is current tax, and deferred tax provision will have to be considered. And then this is known as a profit or loss for the period from continuing operations, that is normal business operations. Then you have to add to that what is the profit or loss from discontinuing operations. So we will discuss this separately, what is meant by discontinuing operations, etc. Then profit after tax from discontinuing operations. So you have to provide tax provision separately for this and find out what is the profit or loss from discontinuing operations. And then the aggregate of this will be profit or loss for the period under reference. That is the final profit after tax after all adjustments for the period under reference. But also calculate EPS, earning per share. That has to be calculated both basic as well as diluted EPS. So when we discuss detailed profit and loss account, we will see how to calculate this earning per share also, both on the basis of basic as well as diluted concept. So this is how we are supposed to prepare a vertical profit and loss account. Is everybody clear on the concept of vertical P&L account? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So now next lecture we will discuss, just like we discussed about the balance sheet, what are the detailed contents of profit and loss account. Is that clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
So
sir.
Yes, sir.
yes, fine. So with this, we will wind up the session for the day. Tomorrow I am planning to send you, or maybe by Sunday I am planning to send you both these formats, P&L account and balance sheet. So you can write it down once, so you'll get familiarized with the details. I will also share with you the PPT. I have to share with you tax PPT also and this PPT also. So I'll share those PPTs also. So when you try to discuss or study these things, you will have these details also with you. Okay. So with that, we'll close today's session. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Bye.